Development staff at the end of the table for item number 11, flooding issues at North Halswell. Thank you. Rather than start with questions, I think if we could start with just a presentation from staff on this matter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just introducing John Higgins, I think you know, and Brian Norton. Brian's a water engineer, waterways engineer.
Something like that.
Perhaps it'd be useful because just to go a little bit back in history, and then John and Brian can come in with some more of the technical detail. I mean, I think firstly, I mean, we well know and we're well aware of the fact that Christchurch is a low-lying environment, and anywhere where we develop, apart from the Port Hills, we're going to have to engage in some form of drainage works. And Mike rightly points out that the city has been acquiring land in that sort of Henderson's Basin area for some considerable time, and in fact, if you go far enough back with the development of the Southwest Area Plan, stormwater management and actually the drainage of that land so that it actually becomes a long-term sustainable environment is obviously a key to that. Henderson's Basin, which is obviously to the south of the area where we're talking about, is the natural ponding point, and for councillors, there is a whole program of work that's been underway since at least 2007 that has been around acquiring land and storage capacity and improving the network capacity to deal with that. So that we've been putting in place the major infrastructure to anticipate the future development of this area in the way that we're starting to see unfold. And as Leanne has pointed out, the sort of, in terms of moving from that general to the particular, what the report outlines is the sort of expectations that we would deliver on any subdivider in that area around the performance of the subdivision in terms of stormwater detention. This area has obviously been a live area for us in discussions with our colleagues at ECAN as well, and Helen's over in the corner, and we do have our stormwater management plans actually are, and our stormwater discharge consents are actually set for this area, so that they do account for and anticipate this level of development that we're talking about. So I think really what I'm trying to say is that the council's been very alive to the issue that Mike and the residents have and landowners have. It is a wet area, so it does need to be managed. We've done that in the general, and now as we move into those particular developments, it's around basically ensuring that the right standards are in place on subdivision to make sure that the issues that Mike raises are actually adequately dealt with. So, I don't know, Brian, if you want to talk in any more detail about the sort of expectations that the two would have on development.
It might be worth just having a short discussion about the strategy for Southwest area and how it might differ from, say, other parts of the city. The program for dealing with water quantity issues and flooding for Southwest area is a bit different in that we're actually requiring new developments to over-attenuate their own stormwater to the point where, from a modeling perspective, the volumes and flow rates of water coming off of the site are actually less than the pre-developed condition, which would be the paddock condition. And that is sort of the cornerstone of our strategy for reducing flood levels in Heathcote and Halswell rivers. Rather than just keeping the status quo and trying to maintain existing flood levels, we told Environment Canterbury in our consent application for Southwest area that we are actually proposing to reduce flood levels to pre-1991 levels. So in effect, the Meadowlands development, which is part of this program, will be capturing all of their stormwater for a 50-year return period event and releasing it slowly to the surface water over 96 hours. The other issue that they'll need to deal with, obviously high groundwater, so they'll need to probably install subsoil to draw groundwater down and discharge it to surface water. In a storm event, subsoil groundwater is actually suppressed, and the system will act as a stormwater detention system in that case. The other thing is flooding of Henderson's Basin, and any proposals to put fill within the ponding area of Henderson's Basin need to be compensated by providing storage elsewhere in the catchment.
I'll just add some comments about the specific Meadowlands development. The issues that are being experienced at the moment is because of the, it's undeveloped, it's farmland next door. When they do come to lodge their subdivision consent, they'll be required to direct the stormwater away from those Henderson Roads properties, which are the concern, and into the more comprehensive swale stormwater drainage network. So the stormwater will be being directed away from those properties and managed within the development site.
Can I just start, because I'm aware that there's a view that there ought to be a reference to ECAN in the process. So could you talk through whether ECAN, have a view on this matter and whether they have a role to play in the process going forward?
We'll get Helen to talk a little bit to that, because it does relate to the consent, whether a consent holder. Helen, you might wish to quickly explain the relationship we have in that.
Thank you.
So as Mike noted, this area has already been consented, so we have a global stormwater consent for the southwest area, and part of that consent requires us to put in place what is called a blueprint. So that's the network of the drainage systems and the stormwater detention basins and the stormwater treatment systems for that whole catchment. So that has all been done and been consented through Environment Canterbury, so it's all signed off.
So Environment Canterbury have signed off on the stormwater drainage for the entire area.
Yes, we require a consent to discharge from our own stormwater reticulation.
Yep.
So they look at all of the modelling that we do in terms of the contaminant load and the capacity of the system, and then give us a stormwater discharge consent with a number of conditions that we have to comply with.
So if the council were to ask that you consult with ECAN on this particular project, it would be meaningless.
Well, yes, we've already done that. We've already done that process, and we meet with ECAN regularly, Environment Canterbury regularly, because we are also looking at a single global stormwater consent for the city.
Right, thank you. Phil Clearwater and then Andrew Turner.
Thank you. I just want to clarify the comments that you were in the original flood task report and relate to this, to where the, I guess the flood management area is in relation to this, because my understanding is in fact that the flood management area is kind of like still to the north, partly of Sparks Road. But I just wonder if you could comment on that in terms of future, in terms of where a future building.
Currently, the flood management area extends to Sparks Road, and so that's the boundary of the FMA. So Sparks Road toward Henderson's Basin is in the FMA. The proposed flood, the floor level?
Oh God, I wish we hadn't changed the
control
name.
area.
This one.
So we've actually revised the stormwater model since the original flood management area was established. There was all kinds of issues with setting boundaries during Variation 48 hearings, I think. And the flood management, or the floor control and fill area, now actually extends partially over Sparks Road and into the Sprayton Lodge site. But it would be very shallow ponding in the model generally.
Would that affect floor levels in that part? Yeah.
It will. So floor levels would be required to be built to a high level as part of the condition.
So we have to give effect to the RPS in terms of protecting new development from flooding in a 200-year storm flood event.
Yep.
But that'll be ground levels as well as floor levels.
That's right. Yeah.
But presumably that in a new subdivision that could be achieved through a mixture of solutions. It could be achieved through creating presumably secondary flow paths in the road. It could be by houses putting slightly higher sort of floor levels for the actual house entrances. So none of this area is such that it falls below the 1 in 50 and creates a point at which housing would be unacceptable in that area.
Yep. Sorry, Andrew.
I'd appreciate some staff advice on a couple of points that were raised in the deputation this morning. First of all, there's a suggestion that the current plans maybe don't cater for increased rainfall due to storm events. And I note in the second bullet point in 4.15 the 50-year, 36-hour storm event, and also the 200-year event that you were just talking about. So the first question is, to what extent do they take into account expected increased rainfall due to climate change? And then the second question, there's a suggestion that there are problems with previous developments that discharge into this area. Were they subject to similar requirements to those in 4.15, or is this something additional for Meadowlands that wasn't required for those previous developments?
I can talk to
You talk to the first one?
Yep.
Yep.
So all of our modeling and flood modeling and stormwater modeling takes into account 16% climate change increase. So we used historic rainfall records from NIWA, and we've added 16% to them, basically.
Okay, so on the second question, there have been some historical issues around that area in terms of stormwater management. Recent subdivisions take into account these requirements in 4.15, and some of the purchasing of land and retrospective work that's being done around stormwater management is trying to rectify some of those more historical issues. So the answer is yes, the modern subdivisions are taken into account, but there are some issues that have existed historically in the area.
Jimmy Chen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. Please confirm with us, because you mentioned earlier regarding the overall, the kind of the flooding issue in that area, and also the council in a consultation with the ECAN already, but at the moment, based on 4.13 and 4.14, at the moment, council not yet received the formal application from the applicant. Once council receive this application, including the engineering report, also with the flooding and stormwater management, the information, then council will do the peer review. What is the process of peer review?
Maybe Brian can talk about that, because he'd be the type of person that would be peer reviewing those reports coming in from the applicant.
So, sorry, are you asking who has peer reviewed City Council's modeling and projects?
When the consent comes in.
So the internal process, I'll start it off, and maybe Brian can complete it. But the process is that there's obviously all this pre-planning that's been done, and there's the Southwest Area Plan, there's the stormwater management catchment plans that have been with ECAN, and then they come in for a subdivision consent. So they apply for a subdivision consent. There's a lot of supporting information around the stormwater issues. That's lodged with council, and then it is peer reviewed by council. So we just don't take their word for it. There is an exercise that goes on to assess whether the conclusions that they've come to are robust, and that's where Brian's team come in, and they do a thorough check of what's being put forward.
So whether those are the peer review, including all those crucial points in the 4.15.
So those are the specific points that this council has established as the measures that it will test those developments against. So we've established those. ECAN, in terms of the stormwater consent, ECAN expect us to meet a certain level of performance. Our role is to ensure that whenever there's an individual development, we're putting the right conditions in place that actually meet that standard. That's the work that Brian's team does in a technical sense, and that's what you see in 4.15, and which John ultimately, through the consent, issues by way of conditions on the consent.
Thank you.
Yanni?
Thank you for the information. I just really want to make sure what I've heard you say is kind of correct, which is basically that this area is probably the most, I don't want to say over-regulated, but it's had probably the greatest level of work around stormwater management in recent history because of the Southwest plan and because of the historic issues. So the technical expert work that has been done in this area is pretty much probably some of the most comprehensive in the city to date. Is that correct?
Yes, I think you could sum it up in that way. I mean, this area has been, it did have some of the historic issues associated with the development of the older part of Halswell. It did have some issues with the Aidenfield subdivision that led to quite a comprehensive and detailed evaluation of the area and development of a solution for the whole catchment. It was part of the South West Area Plan was our most comprehensive planning model for a new growth area, and it's been subject to a very recent stormwater discharge consent with ECAN. So the information that we have about this area and the consent and the standards we're working to are probably the most up to date that we've got.
Right. And then the second question is, given what we've learned from the recent flooding events, what have we done differently in this area based on what happened? What is the kind of, is there any new requirements other than just a slight kind of change to the FMA area?
Again, Brian may wish to comment, but if you recall, I mean, this is one of the areas where we have comprehensively. So we've moved away, obviously, from a strongly piped network or a channelized network to a series of ponds and drains that look at both water quantity. So we're looking to a much more managed environment for water disposal rather than just moving water out of the area. So we're looking to improve water flows, water quality through this, and then managing that discharge into Henderson's Basin and ultimately into the Heathcote River. But Brian, I don't know if you want to comment a bit more on that.
So I think it's important to understand that there will always be storm events that exceed the capacity of your systems. And I think part of that is what we saw in March of last year. However, what we did find
March of this year.
Sorry, March of
It
this
seems that long ago.
And so I think what we did find was that our facilities that we did build under this Southwest Area Stormwater Management Plan performed very well. They didn't get to a state of overtopping. They actually held all the water they were supposed to. The other thing that we do is we use large storm events to actually calibrate the models. So we will actually send surveyors out and record high water levels in ponding areas, and we record those, and then we run the storm profile, exactly how it happened on that event through our models, and we see if we get the flooding that was actually seen on the ground. So every time there's a large flood event, we actually recalibrate and validate our existing stormwater models and tweak things like runoff coefficients and infiltration rates to basically make them better and more accurate.
So councillors, particularly those in that ward, will understand this is part of the larger network. Is for those of you will see the big Awatea stormwater detention works. So that was part of the Awatea development, a major entrance to that development. The Dunbars, you've got the Dunbars detention basin. The council's purchased and developing what we used to call the Clifford land. So that's another Douglas Clifford land, which is a major element, and that's all part of that whole network of the daisy chain network of managing water flows out of that whole catchment to Henderson's Basin and ultimately into the Heathcote.
So it's good to hear that there's at least one good thing that happens as a result of a significant storm event, is that it does give you an opportunity to test the models, and that's always comforting. So thank you. That's the most comprehensive description I've had for a long time. Tim.
Point 1 and point 5, on the 4.15, is really looking at keeping the water away from existing houses on the Henderson's Road. The Rowley area and high water rain events do have water under the houses, etc., and it's really hard for those residents, and it is a concern for them that the development and the possibility of water being an issue overflowing from those paddocks, because it is a sponge area really, we're all aware of that. So is there a possibility of a peer review outside of council just to relieve those concerns? I know there's been a huge amount of work. What are your thoughts on that? Because this is the group of people that I believe would be most vulnerable at this stage.
That's always a possibility, but there's been a lot of... so you're talking about peer reviewing the work that comes in for Meadowlands? Okay. So there's been a lot of extensive work done already, so that's something we can consider, but whether it's necessary, it probably isn't because of all the pre-work that's been done. And there will be, you know, obviously the developers, engineers that submit something will peer review it, and I think if there are concerns, enough concern, then we would look at a further peer review. Is that right, Brian?
It's not usual practice, but it's something we could do. I understand, so they haven't actually lodged an application yet, so we haven't been given anything to look at. But my understanding is that the stormwater design is basically complete in a draft form, and the applicants themselves are having it peer reviewed by another engineer.
I guess the area at the Rowley area would be one of those areas that would have a very quiet voice, and so that's really to ensure that is understood. The other thing is the difference between the Avon and the Heathcote, and one of the key differences is silt runoff. So we have a huge problem with silt in the Heathcote River. So in any of the flood mitigation or ponding, are there going to be extra requirements, or could there be, with regards to filtering silt?
So two things. The majority of silt in the Cashmere Stream and the Heathcote River systems come from the Port Hills, and that's basically due to historic deforestation and some development probably. Our stormwater systems are treatment systems as well, and they're designed specifically to remove suspended solids from stormwater. There will be a two-stage treatment system on this development like there is on any other development in the Southwest area. It involves sedimentation basin, so a basin where water sits for a few days, and Stokes' law means that the dirt will settle out of it. And then from there it goes into a wetland system where it'll get secondary treatment to remove fine particles, and also it'll remove dissolved metals and other contaminants through biological take-up.
Thank you. Just one final one, is it?
Yeah, sure.
You said that you're over-attenuating the flood and stormwater pond, or that you're looking at doing that. So not only will it be able to cater perhaps, or obviously cater for what's happening on the development, but would it also be able to reduce the effects of high water tables, etc., in a storm event in the Rowley area and adjacent areas, or is that?
I think it's important to separate sort of surface water runoff from groundwater effects. Again, we haven't had an application in, but my suspicion is that the engineer will have to deal to both of those. By naturally drawing down groundwater through subsoil drainage in the Meadowlands development, I expect that the groundwater will be lowered for all the properties on the periphery as well, and that should have a positive effect on them.
Thank you.
Sorry, Tim, just the caution in that is we can't obviously use one consent to try and impose a solution for something else. So I think there's a benefit. I think what Brian's pointing to is a beneficial outcome for some of those properties, but some of those historic flooding areas or ponding areas probably needed to be addressed quite differently.
Yep. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
I just wondered whether an outcome from today might also involve a joint workshop with the two community boards and, in public, so that some of this discussion, very helpful discussion, could be held in public, and those who are, interested in the particular issue could, in fact, attend. And of course, councillors themselves can refer people to this section of the live streaming of the council meeting and make it more widely known in their areas that this debate has occurred, and that probably the quality of the debate has been enhanced by the fact that Mike and Debbie Moore from the Community Board wanted to make a deputation on it. So I've found it incredibly helpful. And I also wonder whether we should develop a specific communication, again for the 2 Community Board areas, about the history of the Southwest drainage program, area plan, and how the consenting process has enabled ECAN to have oversight of the development of the stormwater issues in that area, and generally relating back to the historic issues, which we are always trying to address in a city of this nature. So would that be helpful?
Yeah, we could certainly put together a bit of a presentation and workshop the 2 boards through the history of Southwest area, the drainage system, the macro solutions, the work that's been done and continue to be done. That would be
and at the same time develop a communication that's available specifically for people who live in that area. That could be available either online and also in hard copy form as well, so that people again develop an understanding of the nature of the hazards that affect their area. I think be a good outcome of today.
That'd be fantastic.
Okay, I don't think we need to add that to the resolution. We'll just take that as read. And no, you're happy to move the recommendation as it stands?
You mentioned earlier, particularly joining the 2 committee boards.
Yeah, we're going to take that as read. We don't need to write that into the unless people want to. It might be quite nice to have it there. We're accepting it, aren't we? There. Okay, so we're moving. Jimmy Chen seconded. Phil Clearwater. So they've got 1 from each community board. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you, and thank you very much. That was excellent.